Good afternoon, guys. Chuck Rollins, BigCrappie.com guide service and Dallas Fishing Charters down here at Cedar Creek Lake. Today's January 20th, 2020. Wanted to talk to you a little bit about boat safety. What I'm mainly referring to is what you need to do in case you're out here and it's really, really rough. Cedar Creek Lake's one of the larger lakes in Texas, and it gets pretty rough sometimes for a lake. It's not like being offshore and huge swells, but this lake can actually get pretty bad at times. Most of the time when we get a cold front in the early spring, like March and early April, those cold fronts will bring 30-40 mile an hour winds, and when it does, this lake's 20 miles long, so it can throw some pretty good waves towards you. I see a lot of people running around in 16-18 foot boats, sometimes smaller, and you put 3 and occasional 4 footers out there, and it can be life-threatening. I've seen 5 footers, but it's very, very rare. Most of the time at these fronts, we'll have 30-35 mile an hour winds. Occasionally we'll get 45 mile an hour winds. It's not near as common, but we get them. I think one of the worst days I've ever seen, we had 44 mile an hour winds that day coming from the the northwest, and it just blows right down the valley of the lake, and that south end down there by Crappie Island, the waves were monstrous. They were monstrous. Luckily they were not super close together, they were far apart, but they were probably 5 footers. Again, very rare, but it happens. If you happen to be out and the waves get really, really bad, here's some things that you need to know. Number one, you don't want people in the front of your boat. It's extremely dangerous going through waves and people bouncing around. One, for backs, and 2, just for throwing them off the boat or back in the boat and getting hurt. So man, get your kids back, or get your family or friends back. In our case, we make sure we try to get our customers back to at least the center part of the boat. The further back you ride in the boat, the more comfortable it's going to be when you're going forward and hitting waves. So get those people back and let them sit down and save their backs for another day. The other thing you want to do, let's say it's really bad and you need to get over here. Sometimes what we do is, let's say that I've got high winds coming out of the northwest, which is typically where they come from, and I happen to be way down the lake 10 miles from my dock. What I will do is I will actually shoot over to the west side of the lake, and I will run that side of the lake all the way up to where I can make a straight shot across those waves. Now luckily, most of the boats that we run on the lake can easily handle the waves that are thrown, but I'll actually run the tops and the sides of those waves as I'm shooting across the lake. The lake's only, what, 2 miles wide in this Twin Creek area, so it's not the end of the world to have to cross that stuff, but it is dangerous. If the waves get too big, you don't want to be sideways in them. If you do get sideways, obviously it can flip you over. If your boat's small enough and the waves are big enough, it's going to flip you over. It could happen in this boat if it were bad enough. This is about a 25-foot boat. So anyway, what I do is I'll run up that west side, then I'll shoot across, and if it's bad. The one thing for sure, you want to make sure and keep your bow in the wind. If it's like really, really bad, and you're just trying to stay afloat, you shouldn't be worried about anything but that. If you lose something out, you lose your net or a fishing rod or whatever, and it's really, really bad, don't worry about it. Just don't turn around and keep plugging forward, and because if you turn around, it could get really, really bad for you. So anyway, keep the bow in the wind. Now let's say, for example, that you're up on the northern end of the lake and you need to get to the south end, and you've got 40 mile an hour winds, and you start getting down towards the lake, and all of a sudden you're in 4 footers and your boat can't handle it very well. What you need to do is slow down, but keep your bow up, and don't you're basically going to be just riding at the speed of the wave. You don't want to let that wave catch you. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to go faster than the waves are moving, but you'd be surprised how fast those waves move when the wind's really blowing. So basically you're going to come in, you're already in there, And when that big swell comes up, if you had stopped or slowed down, let's say, that wave would crash into your boat. And obviously you don't want that for a couple of reasons. One, if it comes into your boat, it could swamp you. The other thing, it could push you and actually cause you to steer in the opposite direction, like say to the right or to the left, and then all of a sudden it flips you over. There's a bunch of videos online of boats in big swells at like crossing a bar, and you'll see a lot of times what they'll do is they'll get in those big waves and they'll either punch the wave in front of them or the wave behind them will swamp them. So anyway, you just want to make sure and keep your bow up and don't let that big wave catch you, and you're just going to move right through it. And then once you get to a safe area, you know, get out into that area, and you know, if it's a summer squall, it's going to pass in 20-30 minutes, sometimes less. If it's a cold front that's moved through, it's not going to pass that quick. A lot of times it'll blow that hard for a day, sometimes 2 days, and so you need to be able to run back to where you've got your trailer or whatever. So anyway, just a couple of things. One, always wear your life jacket. Two, of course, Texas got the new kill switch law. You got to have that. It's my understanding on the law, and I could be wrong on this, but if you're just idling like this, I don't think you're actually required to have it on. But once you get your speed up, I think you are. So anyway, I could be wrong on that, but that's my understanding of it. So anyway, life jackets, make sure that everybody is, you know, towards the back. If you've got anything on the boat that could potentially get thrown around and cause some kind of hazard, you know, get it in an area where it won't do that. Luckily, like a lot of the bay boats like we run, they've got rod holders, and you know, even on the sides, so you can put your rod in them and it keeps it secure. I try not to ever lay anything on the floor. I don't want rods on the floor. I don't want tackle on the floor. I don't want anything on the floor except for my fish cooler and our feet. Sometimes I'll put the net down there. But other than that, that's it. So anyway, guys, y'all be safe as those fronts approach, and good luck to you out there.